So I'm going to do like one from every question, kind of just to refresh our memories, and then I'll give you guys time to work on it on your own. So starting with the first section, we have to find the sum or difference. So these are when we have a common denominator already. So how do I add or subtract fractions when I have a common denominator? The bottom stays the same, and I just subtract the numerators. Can I combine 7 and 3x? No. So it would just be 7 minus 3x. Or if we said negative 3x plus 7, that would be fine too. All right. For the second part, we have to find the least common multiple of the expression, which is the same thing as the least common denominator. Just here, it's not in a denominator. Let's do number 7. How do you think I can find the least common multiple, or the least common denominator here? Bless you. What do you think I need to do first? Factor. I'm going to factor the first one. So that x plus 2 is already factored. That is one of our factors here. Let's factor the first one and see what our factors of this are. So what are two factors of negative 10 that add to negative 3? Negative 5 and 2. Perfect. So this factors into x minus 5 and x plus 2. So for my least common multiple, what do you think my least common multiple would be? X minus 5, x plus 2. Anything else? Nope. If I have an x plus 2 and an x plus 2, you don't have to list it if it repeats in each one. If I had 2 x plus 2's in one of them, you would have to list it. But because it repeats in that second factor there, we don't have to list it again. So my least common multiple is x minus 5 times x plus 2. All right, let's do number 11. So to find the sum or difference, here we don't have common denominators, so we have to find our least common denominator. So one of our factors is x plus 4. The other one is x minus 3. What do you think my least common denominator is going to be? X plus 4 times x minus 3. Perfect. Neither one has anything in common, so we just have to list them both. What do I do next? Perfect. We can multiply both to the top and the bottom, but we really just want to multiply by what's missing. When you add them together, that's when you multiply both, because then they'll cancel out. So here we just want to multiply the top and the bottom times what's missing. So here both things get multiplied times x minus 3. What's missing in the second one? X plus 4. So the top and the bottom have to get multiplied by x plus 4. So the bottom stays the same. Yep, because it's going to be our least common denominator, which is x, for the bottom. X plus 4 times x minus 3 is going to be the denominator. And then on the tops, we just have to multiply them together and then subtract. So what would I do to multiply 6 times x minus 3? Distribute. We have to distribute the 6 to both terms there. So it'd be 6x minus what? Minus 18. Awesome, because that 6 got distributed to both. Now for the second one, we have to be careful because we have that minus there. So it's technically negative 5x. So same thing, we're going to distribute that negative 5x to both things behind it. So it's negative 5x times x. Awesome, negative 5x squared. What's negative 5x times 4? Minus 20x. Perfect. What would I do next? Combine like terms and we can rewrite it in standard form. So what's going to go first? On top. Negative 5x squared. What would come next? So 6x minus 20x would be negative 14x. And then minus 18 over x plus 4 times x minus 3. And that would be our answer. So for these types of questions, first step is to find the least common denominator. Second step is to multiply by missing factors. So let's look at number 4. What could I do to factor, or how do I find the least common multiple? I got to list the factors of each number. So what are my factors of 3x squared? 3 and x times x. So 3 times x times x. How can I factor 6x minus 18?
6.
Take out a 6, and what am I left with? X minus 3. What are two factors of 6? 2 and 3. Awesome. So let's list our factors. We always start by listing everything from the first one. So I have 3 times x times x. So everything from the first one gets listed. And then if it's not already on the list, we have to make sure we include it on the list. Do I have a 2 on my list? Nope, so we got to put that on the list. Do I have a 3 on my list already? Yes, so we don't need to rewrite that one. What about an x minus 3? Don't have that one, so I need to make sure I include that too. So to simplify this a little bit, what would my least common multiple be?
6x squared. Open parentheses, x minus 3.
Awesome. 6x squared times x minus 3. All right, let's take a look at 6. So to find our least common multiple, which is the same as the least common denominator, we need to factor both of them. How can I factor x squared minus 9? Awesome. It's the difference of squares, so x plus 3 and x minus 3. And then our second factor is just x plus 3. So to list our least common multiple, we start by writing everything from the first one. So x plus 3, x minus 3. And then I have another x plus 3. Do I already have an x plus 3 on the list?
Yeah.
So do I need to rewrite it? No. So our least common multiple would be x plus 3, x minus 3. So for number 9, we have to subtract. So we need to figure out what our least common denominator is first, and then we multiply that to the missing ones. So what are factors of 2x squared? 2 times x, and what about 3x? 3 times x. So start by listing all of the factors of the first, so 2 times x. Then moving on to the second. Do I already have a 3 on my list? No, so I have to make sure I include that. Do I already have an x on my list? Yes, so do I need to rewrite that one? No. So here we have 6x squared. So my denominator is going to be 6x squared.
So if the bottom parts aren't the same, then you do this.
Correct. So if the bottom parts aren't the same and it asks us to find the sum or difference, we got to do this. Now, to combine them together, I need my denominators to be the same. So I have 2 times x, and I need it to be 6x squared. I need it to be 2 times x times 3. So what's missing? Multiply by 3. So I'm multiplying the top and the bottom by 3. The denominator doesn't really matter because we already know it's going to be 6x squared. But looking at it here, 2x squared times 3 gives us that 6x squared. So we're good there. Let's do the same thing with the second one. I have 3x in my denominator. What am I missing? 2 and another x because I need it to be 2 times x times 3. So I already have a 3x, so I'm missing 2x. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom times 2x. Now on the bottom, that gives me 6x squared. So we're good there. Same thing. On the top, we can just combine them together now. So I'm going to multiply. 7 times 3 is 21 minus 4 times 2x would be 8x. So this would be our answer.
You don't have to cancel the x with the x.
The x's don't cancel because remember, this is 21 minus 8x. So you can't just cancel out the x's. It would only be if you were like multiplying the x on the outside. So if you had a GCF on top, you'd want to take out the GCF, but we don't. So we would just leave it like this. All right, let's do number 12. What's the first step? I got to find the least common denominator, so I want to factor both of them if we can factor. So what are two factors of negative 18? 9 and negative 2. Perfect. So this factors into x plus 9 and x minus 2. And then my other denominator is just x plus 9. What would my least common denominator be?
9
Perfect. X plus 9 times x minus 2. You always start by listing everything from the first. I don't have to relist that x plus 9 because I already have it on my list now. What do I do next? We multiply by what? By what's missing. So in my first denominator, what am I missing if I already have x plus 9 and x minus 2? I'm not missing anything, so I don't need to multiply 14 times anything. It's just going to be 14. In the second fraction, I have an x plus 9, so what am I missing here? X minus 2, so I have to multiply the top and the bottom times x minus 2. Now on the bottom, when I add these together, they're now the same denominator, which is my least common denominator, so that would be x plus 9 times x minus 2. On the top, we have 14 plus, what do I do with the 6 times x minus 2? Distribute the 6, so 6x minus 12. Am I done? Could I leave it like this? What would I have to do? Combine like terms. So I have 6x, what? Plus 2 over x plus 9 times x minus 2. So that would be our answer. All right, so from 7.5, cross off the find the inverse questions. That will not be on the quiz on Wednesday. So let's look at number 1. What would I need to do to solve number 1? How do we solve when we have a fraction equals a fraction? Cross multiply. Awesome. So when it's just one fraction equals another fraction, we're going to cross multiply. So this would be 3 times x minus 2. The equal sign just stays in the middle. 4x times 1. What do I do next? Distribute. So we have 3x minus 6 is equal to 4x. From here, you just solve for x. What would we do next? Subtract the 3x to the other side. We're going to move our x's to one side, move the constants to the other. So negative 6 is equal to x. That would be our answer. So don't be afraid of number 4. It's kind of the same thing. You're just going to cross multiply. You're going to solve for x. For number 5 and 6, we're just finding the least common denominator here. So we're not actually solving. It just asks us to find the least common denominator. So my denominator, my factors of the first denominator are just x minus 2. My second denominator is x, and my third denominator is x. What do you think my least common denominator is going to be? x minus 2 times x. Perfect. You could say x times x minus 2. The order doesn't matter. But because we have that other x, you don't have to list it again. But you got to make sure that your least common denominator has all of your factors listed from every denominator. It's just if it repeats in a different denominator, you don't list it again. Okay, and then the second part, down at the bottom, we have to solve the equation by using the least common denominator. So let's do number 8. So first thing we want to do is find our least common denominator.
Well, 2x and then times 4.
Well, 4, what are two factors of 4? 2 and 2. So if I have 2x, so I have to start by listing the factors of the first. A 2 is already listed here. So what else from the second group do I have to include? 2. I have 1, 2, so I don't have to list the 2 again, but I still have that other 2, so I have to write that 2. And then what about from...
A variable next to it, so consider the same number.
Well, this is technically 2 times x. So, like, you can count them as 2 different things, but... I'll do an example of that, but let's finish with this one. So my third denominator is 2x. Do I have to rewrite this 2x here? No, because I already have a 2 and I already have an x. So I don't have to include that other one. Let's say, just as a bonus example, let's say we had 4x, 4, and we can say 2. And it said find the least common denominator. What do you think my least common denominator would be here? So 4x, our factors are, let's break it down. We have 4 and x, and what are two factors of 4? 2 and 2, and x. So we have to include everything from the first. So 2 times x. What are factors of 4? 2 and 2. I already have a 2, so I don't have to relist that one. And I already have a 2, so I don't have to relist that one because I have a 2 there and a 2 there. You have to repeat the 2 because there's 2 2's here. So you have to include 2 2's.
So the rule where it crosses out only applies if it's a separate number?
Only if it's a separate, like, term, yes. Right. Do I have to include this 2 also? No, because I already have a 2 there. You can reuse it if it's coming from, like, separate factors. So here, my least common denominator would be 4x. You can always double check to make sure your least common denominator is, like, enough, I guess you could say, by making sure all 3 of your denominators are going to be able to divide into that denominator. So let's go back to number 8. So our least common denominator would be 2x times 2, which is 4x. If you want to think about it as 2x times 2 or 2 times 2 times x, you can do it that way because that'll be easier to see what you're going to cancel out next. So everything gets multiplied times 2 times 2 times x, times 2 times 2 times x, times 2 times 2 times x. So here, anything that's in that denominator gets canceled out. So I already have a 2. That gets canceled, and I have an x that gets canceled. So now I'm just multiplying 2 times 5. In the second fraction, what gets canceled? What cancels out with that 4? Both the 2's. So this would just be 1 times x. And then in the third fraction, what gets canceled? 2 and x. So this would just be 2 times 9. So you're technically just multiplying by what's missing from that denominator. And then you're just looking at the numerators now, because our denominators all just canceled out. So here, I have 5 times 2, which would be 10, plus 1 times x, which is what? X. And that's equal to 18. Then we just solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 10. So x is equal to 8. So looking at number 9. First thing we want to do is find our least common denominator. 3 doesn't have a denominator. What could I do to give it a denominator? Put it over 1. Now, how can I find my least common denominator? Start by listing the denominators. So what's my first denominator? X minus 3. Does 1 need to be included on our list? No, it's just 1, and multiplying anything by 1 would be itself. Do I have an x on my list now? Do I? I don't already, so I have to make sure I include it. Remember, x minus 3 is different than just x, so you have to make sure you include both of these. Now, when solving, we multiply everything by our least common denominator. So everything gets multiplied times x minus 3 and x. So x minus 3 times x and x minus 3 times x. But if it's already in the denominator, it cancels out. So technically what you're doing is just multiplying by the missing factors. So just like when we were adding, you're only multiplying by the missing factors. So this would just be x minus 2 times x. Here, nothing cancels out, so it has to be 3 times x minus 3 times x. And then the third one, what cancels out in our third fraction? The x. So it'd be 2x times x minus 3. So let's write that all out. So I have x minus 2 times x plus 3 times x minus 3. And that's equal to 2x times x minus 3. Mooney, what would I do next?
You would combine the like terms.
Before I do that, what do I have to do? William, what do I do? Distribute. Good job. So I got to distribute. So I get, that's the next step, combine like terms. So you're just one step ahead. X squared minus 2x plus 3x squared minus 9x is equal to 2x squared minus 6x. Now we have to combine like terms. So I'm going to combine the x squareds and the x's. So we get 4x squared minus 11x is equal to 2x squared minus 6x. What would I do next?
Oh, that 4x squared and that 2x squared. Gotta subtract.
So let's subtract 2x to move it to the other side. And we can add 6x and move it to the other side. So we get 2x squared minus 5x is equal to 0. Now whenever we have an x squared and an x, what do I need to do to solve? Factor. So I have to factor. How can I factor here? Take out the GCF. What's my GCF? X. So I take out the x and I'm left with 2x minus 5 is equal to 0. What would I do next to solve? Set both of them equal to 0. X equals 0. 2x minus 5 is equal to 0. So x is equal to 0 is one of our answers. And then for the other one, I have to solve for x. So I'm going to add 5 and then divide by 2. So I get x is equal to 5 over 2. If I get 2 answers, what do I have to do? Plug them into the denominators to check. So let's start by plugging in 0. 0 minus 3 would be what? Negative 3. So we're good there. What about 0 in my denominator? Is that allowed? No. So what does that mean? 0 is not an answer. Now let's plug in 5 over 2. 5 over 2 minus 3. Does that work? Yep. You don't have to solve it out to figure out what it is. Just know it's not 0. It's not 0 because you have a fraction minus a whole number, so it's not going to be 0. And then 5 over 2, is that 0? Nope. So does 5 over 2 work? Yes. So let's do number 11 next. So we want to find the least common denominator first. What's our least common denominator? X times x minus 4. Perfect. So I have to multiply everything by our least common denominator. X times x minus 4 and x times x minus 4. What do I do next? Cancel them out. If it's already in the denominator, it cancels. So here I'm only multiplying by what's missing. So I have 8 times x minus 4. This guy I got to multiply all 3 of them together. And then here I can cancel out the x minus 4s. So this is x plus 8 times x. So I'm going to write it on the side over here so I have some more room. So I have 8 times x minus 4 plus 3 times x minus 4 is equal to x times x plus 8.
You gotta distribute.
Distribute, awesome. So we got 8x minus 32 plus 3x squared minus 12x is equal to x squared plus 8x. What's next?
Now we gotta combine the like terms.
Combine the like terms. So I'm going to combine these two together. I'm going to put this in standard form too. So we have 3x squared. What's 8x minus 12x?
Negative 4x.
Negative 4x minus 32
It's all me and you.
is equal to x squared plus 8. What can I do next?
We can subtract the x squared.
Awesome. Let's subtract the x squared.
Negative 2x squared.
And let's subtract the 8x.
So then we have negative 12x.
What's 3x squared minus x?
That's 2x squared.
2x squared minus 12x minus 32 is equal to 0. What do I have to do from here?
Now we factor.
Now we factor our favorite F word. How do we factor?
Wait, so 2 factors of
So let's take out the GCF. We're going to divide everything by 2. Since it's a number, we can just get rid of it. We're going to divide the 0 by 2 so it just goes away and makes factoring a lot easier for us. So x squared minus 6x minus 16 is equal to 0. Now, guys, I have two factors of negative 16 add to negative 6.
Negative 8 and 2.
Negative 8 and 2. Awesome. So x minus 8 and x plus 2 equals 0.
So that means that x equals 8 and x equals negative 2.
Perfect. Now, if I get 2 answers, what do I have to do?
You have to plug them back in as x.
Plug them back in into the denominators of x. So let's start with 8. Can I have 8 in my denominator? Yeah, sure. Can I have, what's 8 minus 4?
4.
4. Can I have 4 in my denominator?
Yes.
Yep. So 8 works. So we're good there. What about, what's the other one? 2? Negative 2. Can I have negative 2 in my denominator? Yep. What about negative 2 minus 4?
-6,
So yes. So what does that mean? They're both answers. They both work.